Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rafael Salinas, and this is my presentation on gender communications. So, what is gender communications? In short, gender communications studies the theory behind communication between men and women. First, I'd like to start by describing the difference between sex and gender. Sex is determined at conception by the arrangement of your chromosomes, XX for female and XY for male. While gender is a social construct because it refers to what it means to be a woman or a man. Now, gender is a social construct and it has different properties. It can be dynamic, social, symbolic, or cultural. According to the authors, it is dynamic not just because it exists on a plane, but because its meaning changes over time. As a social construct, gender is learned because we are not born knowing how to act masculine or feminine. Symbolically, it is learned and expressed through language and behavior, and the meaning for masculinity and femininity and ways of communicating those identities are largely determined by culture. This is according to the authors in the text. Now, as some of you know, gender studies and gender communications is usually associated with feminism, although wrongly. But to address these points and just to describe a little bit of the movements that exist, there's different types of feminism, such as liberal feminism. They usually deal with equality between men and women, ecofeminism, which unites that movement with environmental ideas, and Marxist feminism, which examine economic forces that oppress women. Now, there are also male movements. Some of these seem anti-feminist, so I will stay clear of those and just concentrate on pro-feminist men. According to the author in the book, pro-feminist men are the most closely aligned with the liberal feminist position. They share the belief that women and men are alike in important ways, thus should have access to equal opportunities in work, politics, and at home. So, moving forward, it has been mentioned that gender is socially learned. This occurs through interactions, social interactions. Several theories have been developed to study gender development, such as psychodynamic theory. Other theories include symbolic interactions, where gender is formed through communication, social learning, in which gender is learned through positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, cognitive learning, where gender is in a sense intuitive, um, and through standpoint theory, which which says that gender is learned through culture, through one's culture. Okay, so now that we are more familiar with the theories, what do we study when we study gender communications? What we study with gender communications is we can start off with interpersonal communications, which, according to the author, the most obvious interpersonal communication is through romantic relationships. Other interpersonal relationships occur in families and friendships where gender is a consistent component. Another subject that we study when studying gender communications is organizational communication, which in this aspect deals with how gender has an influence over the organizational lines of what men and women, policies, and roles people play. So, another subject that we study while studying gender communications is mass communication. According to the author in the book, a particular focal point of gender and communication focuses on ways in which males and females are represented in culture by the mass media. Now, the purpose of communication is to socialize. However, there are communication style differences when speaking of men and women, especially when socialized in either feminine or masculine communities. Now, these different styles in communication lead to different patterns of communication. According to the author in the book, Uh, Members of a feminine speech community are likely to engage in the following six strategies: equity, support, conversational maintenance work, responsiveness, a personal style, and tentativeness. While masculine speech communities are likely to communicate in ways that exhibit knowledge, refrain from personal disclosure, are abstract, are focused on instrumentality, demonstrate conversational command, are direct and assertive, and are less responsive. And naturally, we also have nonverbal communication within gender. These can include artifacts, personal space, paralanguage, haptics, physical attributes, and silence. So, in conclusion, gender is the social construction of masculinity or femininity as it aligns with designated sex at birth in a specific culture and time period. Gender identity claims individuality that may or may not be expressed outwardly and may or may not correspond to one's sexual anatomy.